Middletown, Ohio wasn't the kind of place where people went missing. A modest town, stitched together by aging brick buildings, mom-and-pop stores, and a handful of fast food joints, life here moved at a predictable, almost sleepy pace. Most families had known each other for generations. People waved to their neighbors. Strangers were noticed. And for many, the hum of daily life was comforting, a kind of quiet safety. But for Lindsay Carver, 25 years old, that very predictability had started to feel like a cage. She was known by many in Middletown, not because she sought attention, but because she was that dependable girl who never missed work, always smiled at customers, and didn't make waves. For the past 2 years, she'd worked at the KFC on Maple Avenue, one of the busiest in town, especially during lunch and dinner hours. Lindsay didn't mind the work. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid her bills and helped her save for classes at the local community college. She dreamed of something bigger, though she didn't talk about it much. Her close friends knew she had once considered moving to Columbus, maybe even applying to nursing school. But in Middletown, dreams had a way of staying small, manageable, safe. She lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment with her younger sister Hannah, who was still in high school. Their parents had moved to Florida a year ago, leaving the sisters to look after each other. It was Lindsay who kept things afloat, working long shifts, sometimes double shifts when staff called out. She rarely complained. Most nights she worked the closing shift, a routine she knew well: clock in by 4 p.m., stay on the register or at the drive-through window, rotate through cleaning tasks, and clock out just after 11 p.m. It was a rhythm she could do in her sleep. But there was one part of the job she didn't love: working the drive-through window alone at night. At the drive-through lane wrapped around the building, poorly lit in some sections. Cars came through quickly, headlights bright, and sometimes people in those cars were less than friendly, impatient, rude, or just off. Still, she handled it. Lindsay was good at staying calm, polite, moving the line along. Her manager, Todd Renner, often said she was one of the best workers they had. That week in October had started like any other. The weather had turned colder, and the leaves in town had begun to fall in waves of yellow and orange. On Monday, Lindsay had worked the evening shift without incident. On Tuesday, she'd stayed late helping to train a new worker. And on Wednesday, October 18th, she was scheduled for the closing shift again. Hannah remembered that morning well. Lindsay had gotten up early, made coffee, and even cooked eggs for both of them. She wasn't in a rush. In fact, she'd seemed a little tired but in good spirits. Hannah had teased her about working too much. Lindsay had laughed and promised, "Just one more late shift, then I get Friday off." She left for work at 3:30 p.m. wearing her usual KFC uniform: black pants, black polo with the KFC logo, black apron, and her red KFC cap. She also had her drive-through headset, which she kept in her locker but usually took out before her shift began. By 4 p.m. she was clocked in, ready for another evening of fried chicken, order tickets, and the familiar hum of the fryer in the background. Todd Renner was managing that night, along with a newer employee named Claire, a quiet, nervous girl who'd only been there a few weeks. It had been an average night. Steady dinner rush, followed by the usual late-night stragglers. Lindsay was assigned to the drive-through window, her usual post. She'd taken dozens of orders, handed out bags through the sliding window, smiled, and made small talk when she could. Claire would later tell police that nothing unusual happened. Lindsay had taken her headset off briefly around 10:30 p.m. to rub her temples, but had put it right back on. Todd had stepped outside for a smoke break around 10:40 p.m. and returned 10 minutes later. Everything seemed fine. The last confirmed sighting of Lindsay came at 10:45 p.m., captured on security footage. She's seen leaning through the drive-through window, handing a food bag to a car they couldn't later identify. The vehicle was a light-colored sedan, possibly white or silver. Her body language seemed normal. She even smiled briefly, then closed the window. After that moment, Lindsay Carver was never seen again. At 11:10 p.m., Todd noticed the drive-through window unattended. The headset was gone, the area empty. He assumed Lindsay was in the restroom or stocking supplies. But by 11:20 p.m., she hadn't returned. Todd checked the restroom. Empty. The storage room. Empty. He called her name. No response. He went to the break room and found her purse, phone, and jacket still in her locker. Her keys were inside the purse. By midnight, Todd called the police. He also contacted the store's security company, who could access the camera footage. Claire was crying, unsure what to do. She said Lindsay would never leave without her things. At 12:45 a.m., Hannah Carver received a call that changed everything. Her sister, reliable, responsible Lindsay, was missing, and no one had any idea where she had gone. The official shift schedule for Wednesday, October 18th, had been printed and posted on the KFC staff bulletin board days in advance. Lindsay Carver was listed for the closing shift, from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m., alongside manager Todd Renner and trainee Claire Meadows. It was a light crew for a midweek night, but that wasn't unusual. Wednesdays were typically slow after 9 p.m., and Todd liked to keep staffing minimal to save labor costs. By all accounts, Lindsay arrived on time. Todd later confirmed she clocked in at 3:57 p.m., her usual habit of showing up a few minutes early. Claire arrived shortly after, nervous as always, and Lindsay had greeted her with a reassuring smile. "Just take it one order at a time," Lindsay had told her. She always took care of people, especially the younger staff who struggled with the chaos of dinner rush. That night, dinner service had gone smoothly. Between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m., the drive-thru had been steady. Lindsay handled the orders like clockwork, taking them through her headset, calling them back to the kitchen, bagging food, and handing it to customers through the drive-thru window. The inside dining area had been nearly empty, and Claire had managed to keep up with the front register. Around 8:30 p.m., the customer flow slowed to a trickle. Lindsay took a short break, sitting in the break room and checking her phone. She replied to a text from Hannah at 8:42 p.m., telling her she'd be home a little after midnight, since closing cleanup always took longer. Hannah replied, "Okay, be safe, love you," to which Lindsay responded, "Love you too." That was the last message she ever sent. By 9:30 p.m., the store had locked its front doors. From that point on, only the drive-thru remained open. Standard closing procedure. Todd began the nightly cleaning checklist, and Claire wiped down tables and stocked condiments. Lindsay stayed at her post at the drive-thru window, still wearing her black apron, KFC logo cap, and drive-thru headset. Between 10 o'clock p.m. and 10:45 p.m., a few cars came through. One man ordered a family bucket, another a chicken sandwich meal. Lindsay's voice was recorded on the order intercom. Calm, friendly, even playful at times. Security footage from inside the kitchen showed her bagging food, stepping over to the window, and leaning out to hand orders through. All routine. At 10:45 p.m., a light-colored sedan pulled up to the drive-thru. The camera angle from inside the kitchen captured it only partially. Headley saw gates flooding the drive-thru lane, the make of the car hard to identify. Lindsay took the order, prepared it, and was last seen on footage leaning halfway through the window, handing over the bag. She nodded, then pulled back inside and closed the drive-thru window. That was the last confirmed visual of her. Claire remembered seeing Lindsay just after that. She said Lindsay walked back from the window, reached for a fresh bag, then paused, as if listening to something. Claire assumed it was Todd giving instructions, but couldn't hear what was said. Lindsay didn't seem alarmed, just focused. Todd, meanwhile, had stepped outside for his regular smoke break around 10:50 p.m. He often did this near closing, stepping to the side alley just beyond the dumpster, where he could relax out of view. He claimed he was only gone 10 minutes. When he returned around 11 o'clock p.m., Lindsay was no longer at the window. Todd assumed she was in the back storage room or bathroom. He began mopping the kitchen floor, expecting her to return, but 10 minutes passed and she didn't come back. That's when he called out for her. No response. He checked the storage room. Empty. He knocked on the restroom door. No answer. It was unlocked and vacant. He went to the back exit door, still locked from inside. He walked to the break room and found her locker closed. Inside, her purse, phone, car keys, and jacket were all untouched. At this point, Todd grew uneasy. He checked the outside lot, walked around the building, even peered into the dumpster area. No sign of Lindsay. He called Claire over and asked if she'd seen Lindsay leave. She hadn't. By 11:45 p.m., with closing duties still unfinished and Lindsay gone for nearly 40 minutes, Todd called his district manager to report the situation. He was told to contact police immediately. At 12:10 a.m., Todd made the call. 2:30 a.m., a patrol car arrived. Officers questioned both Todd and Claire on site. By 12:45 a.m., police had already taped off the back of the building, treating it as a potential missing person case. Inside, Lindsay's uniform still hung on her, or so they thought. Her apron, cap, and headset were gone, but her main uniform shirt was still unaccounted for. Police believed she might have taken them off during cleanup, but if so, where were they? Security footage was quickly reviewed. Cameras in the kitchen and break room worked fine, but the footage from the drive-through area between 10:45 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. was missing. The system had failed to record due to what technicians later called a malfunction. A glitch in the DVR had resulted in a lost segment, the very window of time Lindsay vanished. By morning, the Carver family was at the scene. Hannah was in tears, clinging to hope that her sister had simply left in confusion, maybe had an accident, or wandered off. Police conducted a canvass of the area, questioning nearby businesses, reviewing traffic cameras on Maple Avenue. Nothing, no sign of Lindsay, no witness. Just an empty drive-through window, a missing headset, and a girl who had vanished without a sound. By sunrise on October 19th, news of Lindsay Carver's disappearance had begun to spread quietly through Middletown. It started with a few text messages between co-workers, then whispers exchanged at the gas station and the local diner. By noon, the words missing and KFC were being spoken in every corner of town, and with each passing hour, the mystery deepened. Detective Mary Ann Blake, a 17-year veteran of the Middletown Police Department, was assigned to the case that morning. She had handled missing person cases before, but those usually involved runaways, domestic disputes, or reluctant returns after a weekend gone wrong. This felt different. A responsible, grounded young woman had vanished mid-shift, without warning, without her belongings, and with no known motive to disappear. By 9 a.m., Detective Blake and her team arrived at the KFC on Maple Avenue. The restaurant was closed for the day, a temporary sign on the door reading, "Closed for maintenance, reopening soon." Inside, the scene was still largely untouched. Police tape marked off the drive-through area, the back hallway, and the employee break room. Lindsay's locker remained open, her purse still inside, untouched since the night before. Her phone sat on top, battery drained but otherwise fine. No outgoing calls, no texts after 8:42 p.m. The one she sent to her sister, Hannah. Detective Blake's first priority was to understand Lindsay's state of mind. She interviewed Hannah at their apartment, a small, modest place about 10 minutes from the KFC. Hannah was heartbroken, her voice shaking as she described their last conversation. She was tired, Hannah said, but not in a bad way, just regular work, tired. She even made us breakfast that morning. She wasn't upset about anything. She wasn't planning anything. She was just normal. Detective Blake asked about relationships, boyfriends, exes, friends. Lindsay had dated someone months ago, but they had broken it off peacefully. No one in her current circle stood out. Her routine was predictable: work, home, occasional classes at the community college, grocery shopping, sometimes a movie with Hannah. Nothing wild, no signs of hidden life. Back at the KFC, Detective Blake met with manager Todd Renner and trainee Claire Meadows for formal interviews. Todd appeared shaken, not overly emotional, but clearly on edge. He walked the detective through Lindsay's shift in detail, recounting her actions, the timing, the last customer, and his own brief absence for a smoke break. Blake zeroed in on timing. "You left for a smoke break at what time?" she asked. "Right around 10:50 p.m., Todd said. "I stepped out back like always, maybe 10 minutes. And when you came back?" "She wasn't at the window. I thought she was restocking supplies or in the restroom." Claire confirmed the same. She said Lindsay had been calm and friendly all evening. No arguments, no odd behavior. She hadn't noticed anything strange until Lindsay didn't return. Blake moved to the surveillance system. The restaurant's cameras fed into a small DVR setup in the manager's office. There were 4 cameras: kitchen, drive-through, dining area, back hallway, break room. All footage was reviewed, and what they found troubled everyone. The kitchen camera showed Lindsay working the drive-through window at 10:45 p.m., handing an order to a customer in a light-colored sedan. She appeared normal, engaged. The footage ran for another 30 seconds, then froze. From 10:45 p.m. to 11:30 p.m., the system had no footage. Instead, a blank screen with a signal lost message appeared. At 11:30 p.m., the feed resumed, showing Todd walking through the kitchen. Technicians from the security company were called in. Their explanation was simple, yet unsatisfying. A glitch, a signal disruption or file corruption had caused the DVR to fail for that segment. No one could explain why, and more importantly, why only that time period. Detective Blake wasn't convinced. She ordered a forensic analysis of the system to check for manual tampering. If someone had deliberately erased the footage, it would leave behind digital traces. Meanwhile, her team canvassed the area. They visited neighboring businesses looking for external security footage. A pharmacy 2 blocks away had a camera facing Maple Avenue. It caught a glimpse of the KFC parking lot at 11:05 p.m., and in that footage, a white sedan was seen pulling out of the lot, headlights off, turning down a side street. The license plate wasn't clear, but the timestamp matched Lindsay's disappearance. Back at KFC, detectives searched the building and exterior thoroughly. Behind the restaurant, they found nothing disturbed. No broken locks, no signs of struggle. The dumpster area was inspected, even the grease trap and rooftop, all clean. The back door was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. Blake requested Lindsay's phone records, looking for unusual calls or texts. Nothing stood out. She hadn't contacted anyone that night beyond Hannah. No unknown numbers. No flagged activity. By the end of the day, the public learned the truth. Lindsay Carver had vanished during her shift, and police had no leads. News outlets picked up the story. Social media exploded with theories. #FindLindsay began trending in regional circles. Flyers went up across Middletown. Gas stations, grocery stores, schools, candlelight vigils were held outside KFC. Still, no answers, no clues. Just an empty drive-through window and a town beginning to realize something darker was unfolding in their midst. In the days following Lindsay Carver's disappearance, Middletown transformed. What was once a quiet Ohio town where people left their doors unlocked and waved at passing cars quickly shifted into something unfamiliar, a town on edge. Parents kept their kids close. Night shifts felt heavier, quieter. And everywhere, Lindsay's face stared back from missing person flyers taped to shop windows and gas pumps. Detective Marianne Blake knew the critical window for finding a missing adult was within the first 72 hours. But those hours had come and gone, and no credible tips had surfaced. No ransom note, no witnesses, no further security footage. Lindsay had vanished without a trace. Blake and her team now had to face a different question, not just what happened, but who might have done it. The investigation naturally began with those around Lindsay. Statistically, in missing persons cases, it's often someone the victim knows. Blake began with Todd Renner, Lindsay's shift manager. He was the last known person to speak to her before she vanished. Todd was 44 years old, divorced, no children, and had worked at that KFC location for nearly 6 years. His record with the company was clean, punctual, dependable, low complaints. When interviewed again, Todd maintained the same story. He stepped outside at 10:50 p.m. for a cigarette. He returned around 11 p.m. and realized Lindsay wasn't at her post. He checked the storage room, restroom, and break room, then called for help. His alibi had no external witness. No one saw him outside during that 10-minute window, and there was no outdoor camera facing the side alley where he smoked. Blake requested a voluntary search of Todd's car and home, which he allowed. His vehicle, an older model red truck, was clean, no trace of Lindsay's DNA or belongings. His apartment was modest, tidy, and showed no signs of foul play. Still, something about Todd's calmness unsettled Blake. He wasn't nervous, but he also wasn't emotional. "I don't know what happened to her," he repeated again and again. When asked about the missing security footage, Todd claimed no knowledge of it, adding that only upper management had access to the system's settings. Blake verified this. Local managers couldn't delete or disable footage. For now, Todd remained a person of interest, but no direct evidence tied him to Lindsay's disappearance. Claire Meadows, the trainee who worked that night, was young, just 18, and visibly shaken by everything. Blake's second interview with her revealed no new information. Claire insisted she had been focused on cleaning the dining area and hadn't seen anything unusual after 10:45 p.m. Blake asked about any strange customers. Claire mentioned a man in a hoodie who had come in earlier that week, loitering in the parking lot without ordering. He never returned, but the image stuck in her mind. Police requested transaction logs from the KFC for that night. Most orders were paid by card, traceable. One cash transaction stood out, the light-colored sedan at 10:45 p.m. Since there was no security footage of the transaction and it was paid in cash, there was no customer name. The white sedan seen leaving the parking lot on pharmacy footage at 11:05 p.m. became central. Police attempted to identify it through nearby traffic cams, but the plate remained unreadable. The make and model appeared to be a mid-2000s Ford Taurus, a common car in the area. Blake's team combed through vehicle registrations. Thousands matched. Blake turned to Lindsay's personal relationships. Hannah provided access to Lindsay's social media and text messages. Her accounts showed no signs of distress, no arguments, no cryptic posts, no secret profiles. Her last Instagram post was a sunset photo 2 days before she vanished, captioned, "Long day, but good things are coming." One name surfaced, Ethan Wells, a former co-worker Lindsay had dated briefly. They'd worked together the year before, but he had quit and moved out of state. Blake located him in Columbus, now working at a different fast food chain. Ethan seemed genuinely surprised by the news and had an airtight alibi, including time-stamped work records and a witness. Blake also explored possible stalkers or unwanted attention. No reports had been filed, but one co-worker remembered an older man who frequently came through the drive-thru, always during Lindsay's shifts. He was overly friendly, once leaving a note with his number. Lindsay reportedly laughed it off, never called, and didn't feel threatened. Police tracked the man. Don Matthews, 53, local resident, no criminal record. When interviewed, he admitted to flirting with Lindsay but denied any contact beyond that. His alibi checked out. He was out of state for work the night of her disappearance. As days passed, rumors spread like wildfire. Some believed Lindsay had been abducted by a stranger. Others insisted it was an inside job, that someone at KFC knew more than they were saying. Online forums spun conspiracies about trafficking rings, cover-ups, even supernatural theories. Detective Blake ignored the noise and focused on facts. But she couldn't ignore the pressure. From the public, from Lindsay's grieving family, from her own sense of urgency. Every day without a clue felt heavier. By the end of week 2, there was still no sign of Lindsay and no new leads. The white sedan remained unidentified. The missing security footage, unresolved. The items Lindsay had on her, cap, apron, headset, had not been found. Blake knew one thing for certain. Someone knew what happened that night. And something was still hidden inside that building. The third week of Lindsay Carver's disappearance began with rain. Gray skies hung low over Middletown, and a steady drizzle soaked the sidewalks and parking lots. The KFC on Maple Avenue had reopened a week prior, operating with a new set of staff and private security, a precaution requested by corporate in light of the ongoing investigation. But business hadn't returned to normal. People still came for food, but they didn't linger. There was a weight in the air, especially near the drive-thru window. Some locals wouldn't use it at all, preferring to order inside. Others left flowers on the narrow windowsill, notes scrawled on napkins, or candles in plastic cups. The window had become a quiet memorial to a girl who had simply vanished into the night. For Mel Reyes, the overnight security guard hired just 10 days prior, the place felt wrong from the start. A former Marine, Mel had seen conflict zones, chaos, and worse. But there was something about this place. Too quiet at night, with the buzz of the lights and the shadows that clung to corners, that made him uneasy. His job was simple: patrol the inside and outside of the restaurant every hour from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., check doors and windows, and keep an eye on the building while it was closed. He carried a flashlight, a radio, and a clipboard for logging each patrol. And every night, like clockwork, he did his rounds. On the night of November 8th, just 3 weeks after Lindsay's disappearance, Mel noticed something unusual during his 2 o'clock a.m. patrol. It started with a dripping sound. As he walked past the drive-through area, flashlight sweeping over stainless steel counters, he heard it. Soft, rhythmic drip, drip, drip. It was faint, but enough to make him pause. He followed the sound, which led him directly beneath the drive-through ceiling panel, just above the order station where Lindsay had worked that night. Mel looked up. A dark water stain had formed around the edge of one ceiling tile, barely visible unless you were looking closely. He tapped it. The tile was damp and soft, sagging slightly at one corner. Mel marked the leak in his logbook and radioed the maintenance supervisor, who agreed to send someone in the morning. But something about it gnawed at him. He knew water leaks. They seeped. They didn't drip so sharply. And the stain, it seemed localized, almost like something was pushing the tile down from above. Against protocol, Mel pulled over a stepladder from the supply closet. With a gloved hand, he pressed gently on the corner of the ceiling tile. It gave way easily, flaking slightly at the edges. He lifted it just enough to shine his flashlight inside. And that's when he saw it. In the narrow crawl space above the drive-through ceiling, something dark and crumpled was stuffed into the corner, wedged awkwardly behind a metal air duct. Mel's breath caught in his throat. He reached up, careful, steady. His fingers closed around fabric, soft, worn, and familiar. He pulled, and down came a black apron, dusty and crumpled. The KFC logo was faint, but visible. Mel froze. He reached again, another item. A red cap, likewise dusty, the white KFC letters stitched cleanly across the front. Heart racing now, Mel reached a final time. His fingers found something harder. Plastic, metal, wires. He pulled, and in his hand was a drive-through headset. Broken, the earpiece snapped, the band twisted. He stepped back, staring at the items now laid out on the counter. Apron, cap, headset, all clearly belonging to Lindsay Carver. Mel didn't touch anything further. He radioed the police and waited silently by the drive-through, eyes on that gaping hole in the ceiling as if expecting it to whisper answers. Within 30 minutes, Detective Marianne Blake was back inside the restaurant, her team in tow. The area was sealed off, evidence bags prepared. Photos were taken from every angle. Blake stood beneath the open ceiling panel, staring into the shadows. The items had clearly been hidden deliberately, pushed out of sight, in a place no employee would have reason to access. The apron and cap were untorn, the headset broken, but with no visible blood on any of them. She bagged each item carefully, gloves tight against her wrists. The first real clue in 3 weeks, and it had been just feet above the last place Lindsay was seen. Who had put her belongings up there? Why only these items? Where were her shirt, pants, shoes? And why had no one noticed the leak sooner? Maintenance logs showed the ceiling had been intact during the previous week's inspection. The stain was new, likely caused by condensation from the hidden items, moisture gathering on the plastic headset, the sweat-dampened fabric of her cap and apron. Whoever hid them had done so in haste, and with an intention to conceal, not discard. Detective Blake's mind raced through possibilities. Could someone have returned weeks later to hide them, or had they been there all along, unseen? Mel Reyes stood nearby, watching in silence. He'd seen enough during his time in uniform to know this was not random. This was a message. And now, with this discovery, the case of Lindsay Carver had shifted. From a disappearance to something far more chilling. Detective Marianne Blake had seen a lot in her 17 years with Middletown PD. Domestic disputes, drug busts, the occasional missing person. But nothing about Lindsay Carver's case followed the usual patterns. People didn't just vanish in the middle of a work shift, and now, 3 weeks later, someone had tried to hide her belongings just feet above the drive-through window where she was last seen alive. The recovered items, her KFC apron, logo cap, and headset, were immediately sent to the State Forensic Lab in Columbus. Detective Blake didn't expect much. If the person who hid them had any sense, they'd have wiped them clean. Still, she hoped for something, a fingerprint, DNA, a stray hair, anything. In the meantime, Blake and her team revisited the crime scene, this time with fresh eyes. The crawl space where the items were found was shallow, just about 1.5 feet between the ceiling tiles and the roof above. No one could stand in there. It was strictly a gap for air ducts, wiring, and maintenance access. And crucially, no ladder was needed to reach it. The ceiling tile could be pushed up from the drive-through station, reachable by standing on a stool or even the counter itself. In other words, whoever hid those items likely did so from inside, and likely on the night Lindsay vanished. Blake ran a timeline audit of every employee with access that night. Only 2 staff members were in the building: Lindsay Carver. Todd Renner, shift manager, Claire Meadows, the trainee, had clocked out just after 11 p.m. and was ruled out. She was in the dining area when Lindsay disappeared and had no opportunity or reason to hide items. Blake questioned Todd again. "I didn't touch anything," he said, shifting in his chair. I couldn't. Why would I hide her stuff?" Blake watched him closely. He was sweating, his fingers twitching against the table edge. "Tell me exactly where you were between 10:45 and 11:10 p.m., minute by minute." Todd repeated his earlier story. Smoke break out back, then returning to find Lindsay missing. He insisted the drive-through window was empty when he came in. But Blake noted one thing. In Todd's initial statement, he never mentioned hearing the ceiling drip, which Mel Reyes had noticed immediately. If those items had been hidden above the window and dripping, why didn't Todd notice? Had they not been there yet? Or had he chosen not to say anything? 3 days later, the forensics lab report came back. No blood on the items, no fingerprints. The items had been wiped clean, likely with gloves. However, there was one detail: sweat residue and skin cells on the inside band of the headset. DNA tests confirmed it was Lindsay's. Additionally, fabric fibers from the apron matched the employee locker where Lindsay kept her uniform. But the apron and cap had traces of dust, consistent with the ceiling crawl space, confirming they'd likely been up there for at least 2 weeks. So the items weren't recently planted. They had been hidden shortly after she vanished, possibly that very night. Blake turned her attention to employee schedules. She requested staffing records from the week before and after Lindsay's disappearance. That's when a pattern emerged. One name, long dismissed, stood out: Daniel Price, former employee, maintenance assistant, who had quit abruptly 2 months earlier. Daniel had access to back rooms, ceiling spaces, and had worked with Todd occasionally on closing shifts. His reason for leaving was never disclosed. He simply stopped showing up. A minor footnote. Curious, Blake pulled Daniel's personnel file. No criminal history, but something odd. He had been reprimanded twice for lingering around the drive-through area during closing, even when not on duty. Blake visited Daniel's last known address, an apartment across town. The landlord said he'd moved out recently, no forwarding address. But he'd left behind a vehicle, an older white sedan, now abandoned in the lot. Detective Blake's team processed the car. The make and model, 2005 Ford Taurus, matching the vehicle seen on CCTV leaving KFC the night Lindsay vanished. Inside the trunk, they found fast food bags, old receipts, and discarded wrappers. Nothing immediately alarming. But beneath the driver's seat, they recovered something chilling: a folded map of Middletown with KFC marked in red ink and several notations in the margins: times, dates, employee shift notes. Daniel had been watching the store, even after quitting. A regional alert was issued for Daniel Price. Days passed with no sign of him until a tip from a motel manager in nearby Dayton. Daniel had checked in under a different name, paying cash. The manager recognized his photo from the alert. Police raided the room, but Daniel was gone, leaving behind only a duffel bag containing clothes, a burner phone, and a KFC drive-through receipt dated October 18th, time-stamped 10:45 p.m. It was the final order Lindsay took, paid in cash. Detective Mary Ann Blake stared at the receipt in the evidence bag, its edges creased, the ink slightly faded. The timestamp was unmistakable: 10:45 p.m., October 18th, the exact moment Lindsay Carver was last seen alive at the KFC drive-through window. And it was found in a motel room under a different name, abandoned by a man who shouldn't have been anywhere near that restaurant. Daniel Price was no longer just a person of interest. He was now the prime suspect. The motel receipt and surveillance linked him to Lindsay's final customer, and suddenly, everything the investigation had lacked fell into place. Blake no longer had to wonder who drove the white Ford Taurus or who had reason to know the layout of the KFC building. Daniel had worked there, had access, and had likely been watching Lindsay for weeks. But as they combed through the abandoned motel room, one detail gnawed at Blake's mind. Why hadn't Daniel run sooner? He'd waited 3 full weeks before disappearing. That meant for a while he'd been in town, close by, maybe even visiting the KFC, hiding her items above the ceiling, slipping in unnoticed. Or worse, he had never truly left the building that night. Blake returned to the security footage again. The system had glitched between 10:45 p.m. and 11:30 p.m., the exact window when Daniel could have acted. But there was another angle, a silent witness no one had thought much of. The drive-through intercom system. Standard KFC drive-through systems included a microphone and speaker, both inside and outside. While audio wasn't recorded, the hardware logs, call activations, timestamps were digitally stored. Blake obtained the system logs from the manufacturer. What she found was unsettling. Between 10:45 p.m. and 10:49 p.m., the drive-through speaker activated 3 times, despite no new vehicle in the lane. These weren't customer activations. They were triggered from the inside headset, meaning Lindsay, or someone else, had keyed the mic. The final activation occurred at 10:49 p.m., then silence. Blake compared it to Todd's statement. He left for his smoke break at 10:50 p.m., meaning something happened in those 4 minutes, right after Lindsay's last known interaction. Daniel had no business being at KFC that night. He no longer worked there, and the building was locked from the inside. The only access points were the front door, locked at 9:30 p.m., the back exit, secured from the inside, the drive-through window, sliding panel, able to be opened manually from the inside. Blake now considered something chilling. Had Daniel come through the drive-through, not just to order, but to get inside? Staff remembered the white sedan, Lindsay leaning out the window. Was it possible Daniel grabbed her, forced his way through the window, and entered the store? It seemed far-fetched, until Blake tested it. A forensic technician, matching Daniel's build, reenacted the scene. With Lindsay's 5'4" frame, the man could have overpowered her, pulled her partially through, then entered himself. Time needed? Less than 30 seconds. And no one, not Claire, not Todd, had eyes on her during that exact window. Once inside, Daniel could have forced Lindsay toward the back, perhaps toward storage, bathroom, or the rear hallway. The question remained, why wasn't there any noise, no struggle, no witnesses? Claire had been in the dining area playing music softly over her phone. Todd was outside smoking. For those 4 minutes, 10:45 to 10:49 p.m., no one was watching. Blake also now believed the items were hidden that same night. Daniel had worked maintenance. He knew the ceiling crawl spaces, had used the ladder, and had time alone inside during the missing footage window. By the time Todd re-entered, Lindsay was gone, the drive-through quiet, and Daniel had slipped back out, possibly through the back exit, which Todd claimed was still locked. But had it been? Or had it been opened, then relocked from outside with a tool? Blake ordered a full inventory of KFC tools, maintenance keys, screwdrivers, lock access picks. One key tool was missing, a universal lock pick used by former maintenance staff to relock doors. Daniel had kept it. A statewide manhunt was now underway. Daniel's face was on every news channel in Ohio, his mugshot and vehicle photo widely shared, but Daniel had vanished again, likely on foot with no digital footprint. Hannah Carver, devastated but determined, appeared on TV, pleading, "If anyone sees him, if anyone knows where my sister is, please come forward." Blake's gut told her Daniel was still close. He had unfinished business, and now that his secret was exposed, he had nothing to lose. It was early morning, just past 4:00 a.m., when Detective Marianne Blake's phone rang. On the other end was Mel Reyes, the overnight security guard from KFC, his voice low, urgent, tight with unease. "I think you need to come down here," he said. "Now." Blake dressed in silence, the ache of exhaustion pushing against her ribs. For weeks she had chased shadows, theories, dead ends. Now, as she sped through the dark streets of Middletown, she felt it. that sharp instinct in her chest. Something had shifted. When she arrived at KFC, Mel was standing by the back door, flashlight in hand, face pale. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick and still. "You need to see what's in the storage room," he said. Mel led Blake through the empty restaurant, past the humming fryers and spotless counters, into the narrow back hallway. He paused at the storage room door. "This door," he said quietly, "it's always locked after hours, always. But tonight, it was open, just a crack, and inside, something's wrong." Blake entered cautiously. The storage room was small, shelves lined with boxes, cleaning supplies, paper goods. Nothing seemed out of place, until Mel pointed to the far corner where a metal panel on the floor sat slightly ajar. "I've never seen that before," he said. Blake knelt down, pulling the panel fully open. Beneath it, a narrow crawl space, barely large enough for a person to slip through, led to a dark, hidden recess beneath the building. The smell hit her first: stale air, damp concrete, and something else, old, sour, like mildew and decay. She radioed for backup, her voice calm but sharp. "I'm going in," she said. "Bring lights and medics." Blake crawled through the opening, her flashlight cutting through the dark. The tunnel dropped down into a forgotten utility room, part of an old basement structure that predated the current KFC building, long sealed off during renovations years ago. The walls were bare cement, and cobwebs clung to the ceiling beams. In the corner, beside an overturned plastic crate, Blake saw a blanket, an old mattress, and a small pile of items. Her heart pounded. On the mattress lay a tattered KFC uniform shirt, folded. Nearby, a pair of white sneakers, Lindsay's size, and next to them, a necklace, delicate silver with a small pendant, engraved with the letter L. There was no blood, no body. But on the far wall, smeared in dust, someone had scrawled a message with their finger. "I tried to get out." Search teams flooded the space. Within the hour, cadaver dogs were brought in, and ground-penetrating radar scanned the surrounding foundation. Despite intense searching, no human remains were found in the room. But the forensic team confirmed DNA on the mattress and necklace belonged to Lindsay Carver. She had been held here, likely for days, maybe longer. A food wrapper, date stamped October 21st, suggested she had still been alive 3 days after vanishing. But there was no sign she ever left the room alive. Daniel Price was never seen again. Surveillance from a bus station in Dayton captured him boarding a bus 3 days earlier, heading south, carrying only a duffel bag. His trail vanished. Blake believed he had kept Lindsay alive, hidden beneath the very place she worked, before something went wrong: illness, starvation, fear. And when she died, he panicked, removed her body, and fled. No remains were ever found. The KFC location closed permanently 2 months later. The building was razed, the lot left empty. Locals still drive past the overgrown pavement, remembering Lindsay, the girl with the warm smile, who vanished from her shift and was found only through a ceiling drip and a guard's instinct. Her family held a memorial service. A small plaque now sits under a maple tree nearby, reading, "Lindsay Carver, loved, remembered, never forgotten." Detective Blake visits the spot often. She still carries the case file, still wonders what Daniel did with Lindsay's body and why. But more than anything, she remembers the words scratched on that wall: "I tried to get out." And she believes Lindsay did. Just not in time.